Good morning, everybody. My name's Fiona Stubbs. I'm the careers manager here at the College of Medical Veterinary and Life Sciences. It's a real pleasure to welcome you today to this webinar. Just a few bits of housekeeping before we start. At any time during this presentation, you're welcome to post some questions on the Q&A function. You can see it at the bottom of your screen if you wiggle your mouse. Nan and I are going to be asking some questions to Andy, and after that time, we will open up questions to the audience. We're recording this webinar, and we'll be able to send you the link afterwards, and it will be available more generally. So I think that's it. No more housekeeping items for me. It's an hour-long session. We hope you're going to enjoy it. I'm going to start by just reading a short bio for Andy to set the scene, and then we'll start with our questions. So, Andy, as he likes to be known, Andy White is a two-time University of Glasgow graduate, having completed his Physiology and Sports Science BSC degree in 2011 and his PhD in 2014. He has had many jobs and roles during and after this time, from playing international rugby whilst at university to working with Olympic and Paralympic medalists at the Sports Scotland Institute of Sport, coaching professional footballers at Kilmarnock Football Club and founding two businesses. Amazing. At the start of his career, Andy predominantly worked in his degree area as a sports scientist. But since taking his experience and starting up his own company, he has been an entrepreneur, a marketeer, a manager, a salesperson, a bookkeeper, a cleaner, and is now getting ready to be a student again and complete his MBA, his Masters in Business Administration. So welcome, Andy. It's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for taking your time. Where are we speaking to you from today?
Thanks very much for having me. I'm in Mulgai, just outside Glasgow. So I've stayed around after university. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this today.
Great. Well, good to have you. Anyway, Nen and I are going to play a double act and ask questions. But Nen, I think you've got the question to kick us off.
Yeah. Hi, Andy. Good to see you. So as part of your undergraduate degree, you did an internship project. So just to give people that have tuned in just a bit of a background to that, this is a project that's offered to undergraduate physiology and sports science students in their final honours year, where they have the opportunity for the duration of their project to go out and work in an applied sports science setting. That could be working at elite level football clubs, rugby clubs, hockey teams, and so on. Kind of vast array of places where the students can end up. And Andy, I think, was probably one of the first students to do the internship project.
I was going to say, I think we were the first year, yeah.
So going back a few years, but so Andy went to Kilmarnock Football Club for his internship placement. So a couple of questions related to that then, Andy, is essentially, first of all, just what your initial thoughts are on these internship placements, and what you learned from the placement itself and how it's helped you with your future job prospects.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so you were right. I think we were the first year to do the internship. And it was certainly something that I gained a lot from in a number of different ways. I think, broadly speaking, a student, whether it's in fourth year, you don't have to wait till fourth year to do an internship. Getting experience within a working environment is hugely important, and I think that goes for any role that you're trying to take on. But certainly from sports science, it's quite a small job market, so getting that kind of experience is great. For me, I then ended up at Kilmarnock a few years later, so I got a massive amount from being there, being able to showcase what I could do, and learn in that environment and kind of be thrown in the deep end. Dr. McFarlane was very much like, on you go, and I had a bit of a background and had done a little bit before, and I'm sure we'll kind of touch on that anyway, but I had a little bit of a knowledge, so I could go in there and kind of work with first team players at the time and get to know people, and the staff got to know me, and then ended up what would have been maybe 5 years later, if not longer. They remember my name, and I ended up getting approached for a job there. So obviously it helped in that way. So you never know where an internship might take you. But I actually thinking about this the other day, that there was 4 of us on it, 4 interns that went to Kilmarnock that year. And if I look at the people that and what they do now, none of them work in sport, but I think they all gain something from the internship. So there was a girl there who went on to do teaching qualification, became a PE teacher. So that was her first ever interaction coaching. She worked with the academy players. So that was her first interaction coaching young athletes. So she's obviously been able to take that in a PE environment. And then 2 of my best mates, one sells smoked salmon to Michelin star restaurants. And one of the reasons he got into that role was being able to deal with people that have a little bit more money, people that are in that kind of world where they'll spend on expensive things. So he had that understanding of that environment, and that comes from football. And then the other guy, Darren, he's now I don't know what his title is now, but he used to be in the helicopter paramedic. He was in that, and he's now moved into something even more specialized. But he did the video analysis, and I think that kind of analytical mindset and being able to deal with those kind of situations has helped him as well. So I got something from it very much from a sports science perspective, but I think from an internship perspective as a whole, if you see it as an opportunity to broaden your horizons, then it's brilliant.
Good. Just another quick question about the internship, Andy. So it can be quite intimidating and quite daunting for students to go into this environment because they haven't really had any practical experience prior to going on the internship. So there'll be a few students that have again joined us today that will be thinking about doing an internship or thinking about applying for scholarships somewhere. So what advice would you give for that kind of initial introduction to the club and almost that first day with the club, because that's a huge barrier to overcome? So what advice would you give for that, perhaps that first day?
I guess it goes for any real, going in any job situation. It's a practice run, and an internship is a bit of a practice run at it. Remember that they know you're there for an internship. They know that you don't know the role. So the big thing for me is to make sure that you're personable and you get to know people. The worst thing that you can be as an intern is drawn away from it and not engage in conversations. So I guess I probably prepared, and I still do now, of have a couple of thoughts in my head of what kind of questions I'm going to ask, because questions create conversations, and conversations then create that ability to be part of a group. So I think prepare for that, do a little bit of research on what you're going into. I made sure I knew kind of who the key players were within the team, so at least you can have a conversation about that. So I don't know where they might go in the internship, but at least have do a little bit of digging. But remember that it's an internship and they don't expect you to come in and be a member of staff.
Okay, good. Thanks, Andy. I think Fiona's going to ask you about your PhD now.
Yeah, thank you. And also, I suppose, have a bit of faith in yourself. I mean, all of you are at Russell Group University. The degree you're doing is very well regarded, and you probably know more than you think you know. So yeah, thanks for that. So after your degree, you chose to do a PhD. What was it on, and why did you choose to do research after your graduation, particularly when you'd had exposure to the outside non-academic world?
Okay, so the first part, it was on using GPS, so global positioning systems, analysis of field hockey, a sport I'd never played or been involved in. That's Nairn's sport, not mine. And the reason I did it was I had, and I mentioned him before, Dr. McFarlane. I had a conversation with him. I'd been looking at the job market, looking at what kind of jobs I might want to go and work in. And I was quite a fixed mindset of this is what I'm going to go and do, and I wanted to work in elite sport. And I looked at the job market, and everyone else, like all the jobs were like essential requirement, BSc honours, okay, tick, I'm getting that, right? Desirable, masters. And then more and more I was looking at, there was other ones that were starting to, like, it was always masters, masters, masters. And I just thought, well, I want to separate myself from everyone else. And so I had a conversation with Dr. McFarlane around, like, how do I do a PhD? How can I get involved in this? So I kind of created a bit of an opportunity for myself by pushing that and having a little bit of a thought process about where I wanted to go. And the sport didn't really matter to me. Like I'd been working in and around Institute of Sport at that point, so I knew that being around lots of different sports, lots of variety, diversity of thought was good. So I didn't mind about the sport, and I had experience from my internship using the GPS systems. And for those that maybe don't know about the GPS, just little units that athletes will wear. You'll probably, if you watch TV, you'll see them wear a wee bump on their back. And it gives you loads and loads and loads of metrics, loads of data around distance covered, speeds that they move at, accelerations, decelerations, you name it. It's kind of big brother on their back. So I had a bit of a knowledge about that, and I could see that the industry was moving that way in terms of, like, this is going to be a big deal going forward. So why not get on board and learn about it?
Oh, thank you. I mean, I get lots of students on our one-to-one kind of career coaching saying to me, I'm thinking of doing a PhD, and I've not done a PhD myself, but I feel it's something that you don't take lightly. It's at least 3 years of a life. And I just wondered what the highs and lows were of your PhD.
So I think I was blissfully ignorant to how hard it would be. And also I left university and with my first class degree, and I was pretty confident in my abilities to do it. However, highs and lows. A high would have to be when I managed to get funding to go to present some of my work in Las Vegas. That was good.
Wow.
But I guess it's a very lonely existence at times. I remember being having this little tiny office in I can't remember what the building's called now, there, just down from your office.
Now the Sir James Black building.
Yeah.
So
in there, and it was, you're just working days at a time on your own, or I was going all over the country collecting data and then getting back in at silly o'clock at night to then download it, and it was tough. But at the end of the day, I knew it was going to give me something, and it was going to be something that would add to my CV. Now, I went in it very much to add to my CV. I didn't go into it to have a career being this specialist in GPS. And I think there's two different ways of going about a PhD. One is to get the PhD and to learn through that process. And then the other way is it's the kickstart to the rest of your career, maybe in academia or going to become a real specialist. But I've always been a generalist, and so that was kind of why I went about it. I forgot the second part of your question.
No, you answered it. It was just highs and lows. So would you say overall it was a good decision? I mean,
yeah, no, definitely. I think I'm not one that regrets things, so I think it was definitely a good decision. And I had a massive learning point when I finished it. I went and did my viva. I'd rushed my thesis prior to the viva. It was Commonwealth Games year. I wanted it finished for the Commonwealth Games. I got my thesis in, and I went to my viva, and it was the hardest 3 hours of my life. It was tough. I think afterwards I was another one of the lecturers, Vicky Pemprays, found me sitting outside the boy door, head in my hands, being like, "Oh my God, what just happened to me?" But it was like, I look at it now, and it was Dr. Grant. He might well be a professor now at Hull, and he taught me so much in those 3 hours about being detailed and just understanding what it really meant, and actually realizing that I've had to earn that PhD. So now I'm much prouder for what I've produced, because I had to get through that hard one, and now any interview just seems like easy. So yeah,
Thanks,
it was
Andy.
worth it.
Thank
Brilliant. So Andy, when you were doing your undergrad and your postgrad, you were working as a strength and conditioning coach as well. So could you just give us a bit of insight into what that role involved, and then how you then managed to juggle part-time work in a pretty high pressure job alongside full-time education as well?
So yeah, I probably started doing stuff in kind of second year. One of the guy that sells smoked salmon, we actually set up a personal training business early, like in our second year. And we just thought, oh, let's get some experience, but let's make some money. So we started that, but then third and fourth year was when I started to do stuff with Institute of Sport. It just came through being an athlete previously in Institute of Sport, and I kept putting myself out there. I just always knew that to get into sports science and get into elite sport, you have to be different. You have to go and put yourself out there. So that was how I got in, and I think I started with Scotland under 21 hockey, and that was in third and fourth year. And I was taking sessions in Bellahouston at the Palace of Art at stupid o'clock in the morning. It was like 6:30 in the morning or something. I was starting the sessions to coach. So then I would finish, and I would go directly from there. I would take my breakfast with me and everything. I'd go directly from there to my lectures at 9. So your question around like how did I fit it in? I just had to be very, very planned with what I was doing, and I kind of just set out my days, and it came from playing rugby and being involved in that kind of world of like, you get up at this time, you go to breakfast at this time, this is what you have to wear. Like, that's what was the environment in rugby. So I had that process, and I was very, very deliberate about what I did. I enjoyed the student life, but I wouldn't be your stereotypical student. I was very set out in what I did. If I had an afternoon where there's no lectures, but I knew I had work coming up the rest of the week, or I was going to be like, I knew the hockey was going to be busy for a month, then those afternoons I had to dedicate myself to go to the library or whatever it was. And I think that's where like being a strength and conditioning coach kind of helps, because you think in terms of like a long-term plan, a medium-term plan, like a short-term plan. So I then took that philosophy to life and to my studies, which is what I do now. I kind of look to the future to say, right, well, so I know that, for instance, this month, end of this month, I have 10 days where I'm with the Scotland women's football team. I'm in camp, I'm going to be busy. So between now and then, I know I've got to write a 3,000 word assignment for my MBA, but I've also got 2 businesses to run. So you just have to set out each week, right? What am I going to achieve this week? And that was how I did third and fourth year. I just had to kind of separate everything out, and it was tough. And then when I went into my PhD, I think it was possible. I was part-time. As soon as I finished university, I was on a part-time 0-hour contract at the Institute of Sport, which then grew to be 30 hours a week. I was still classed as part-time. It was great because you got paid an hourly rate, but I then started my PhD. and that was just, I gave up playing rugby. Weekends, I was either doing my PhD or prepping work to get ahead or whatever it was. I just did that. I loved it. I was lucky. My wife at the time, she'd decided to go on to do a master's, so very romantically we would spend weekends in coffee shops and do do our respective work, and that was just the way we got about it, because we knew that in the future it would pay off. So that's how I balanced it, and you kind of I just made that decision, and you kind of give up some things to make sure it worked. And I gave up a lot when I played rugby. I just used it. So yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy. So to me, time management, prioritization are things that were quite key for you getting through that period. As a careers manager, I'm always talking about transferable skills. So not the technical science skills that you all gain from your studies, but those softer skills, employability skills that we employers like. And I just wondered if you could think what transferable skills you've developed working with elite athletes, and what might students need to consider if that's their interest.
I certainly think one thing you're not taught is how to speak and interact with people, and I think that's hugely important. And the more senior the player or the manager, the more you need to be able to understand other people, and in certain situations show empathy, and like a lot of the time you're a listener, so being able to listen and take information on board and be an active listener and actually just be involved in those conversations. I think that's something that I've developed over time, and how to deal with that. And also maybe in terms of like put yourself in their shoes, and have that sense of perspective of, right, they may be saying something to me, but there's something behind it, and how can I understand where they're coming from. I would say there are a couple of things, and probably I guess people would term them as maybe softer skills, and then self-awareness, like that's probably a big transferable skill that I've developed. I think I said just a bit ago, like I'd finished university, I had a first class honours degree, I was going to go and do a PhD. Like I'm sure of myself, and that's helped in a lot of respects. And I certainly wouldn't have been able to work in professional football if I wasn't sure of myself. But you also have to have that kind of like self-awareness of like, where's the line, where's that line to arrogance, where's that, like, so have that self-awareness of understanding that you don't know everything. Yeah. Like I think back to some of the things when I was just out of university, and I was probably talking to people senior than me in jobs, and I'm like, wow, did I act like that? Because you think, oh, I've done this uni degree, I know everything. There's masses of you just start to learn more and more that you don't know that much. So just having that ability to kind of check yourself, and I think that's something again that you're not taught at university, but is very important, because then that'll determine how you interact with the next person that you go and interact with.
So that's great. So that's, you've said being able to talk to people, to know where the line is in terms of how you react, being a good listener and empathetic, but ultimately these are things that, if you're self-aware, you can sort of develop. That's great. Moving on now to you've obviously had your own business. Some students, particularly in your area, I'm presuming, might have aspirations to own their own business. Have you got any advice for them? How they may start, who might be able there to help or be a sounding board?
Advice. I think with it is, if you want to do it, you've got you kind of. I've always had the opinion of you've got to go and try.
Yeah.
But there's some things that I'm very much still learning at the moment. And there was something that I'd listened to recently in terms of like when you run a business and you're a technician. So I was an S&C coach setting up a business. Like, you're good at the technical part, and that's important for it to be like a one-man band small business. But you then have to develop the other sides of it, of entrepreneurship or management. So I think when I set out, I very much went down, right, well, I can do this. I've got the technical skills to do it, and I've got a small network of people within sport that I can call on, and they know me, and we can get little jobs set up, and I can make money. But it only goes so far, and now I'm learning that, right, actually, to make this work, you need to have a better foundation than that. I probably disregarded things like Business Gateway, or I remember going to Business Gateway and then telling me to write a business plan, and I was like, what am I doing here? I know what my business does. So maybe putting a little bit more emphasis on what you're actually like building, because in the future that'll be important. And you might think setting out at the start, like, I didn't have anyone helping me with like accounts or anything like that, or I hadn't went and even YouTubed a video of like how should you do bookkeeping, or how do you use QuickBooks. Like, I hadn't done any of that. I just thought, oh, I'll learn as I go, and you can get yourself into some like bad situations from that. So yeah, if you're going to be setting up a business, remembering that the business isn't just being a sports scientist or being an S&C coach or whatever it is, being a nutritionist. There's a lot more to it. So if you don't understand that, then you're either destined to be very, very small as a company, or you're destined to fail.
Yeah. Hence the MBA then.
Yeah, that and imposter syndrome has meant the MBA.
Yeah. All the best. I'm sure I've worked with MBA students in my previous job at London Business School, so I know it can be a real great tool. It helps solidify your knowledge and puts what you're doing into practice and vice versa.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, I was talking to a friend before, and she was mentioning about her career, and it's great to hear that you did this and went on to do that and had this experience. But I'm always quite intrigued in the bits in between experiences. And so the question I'm going to ask you, has there been a person or a moment or an event that's helped you to make those linkages in your career?
There's probably been a lot of people that I will be listing loads and loads of names. Like, there's a lot of people that have had an impact on what I do. But I would say that there'd be two like turning points for me in terms of what I did. And I would say both of them were negative experiences, but then led on to opportunities. So the first one that you mentioned at the start was rugby. So I was very much of like, I guess, again, I read in a book recently about like deliberate strategy. I did deliberate strategy. I was going to be a professional rugby player. Like, I played like Scotland 17s up to under 20s, and I thought, right, that's what I'm going to do. And then after my under 20s year, I was released. That was it. I wasn't getting signed on a pro contract. I wasn't getting to do what I wanted to do. But I'd always had that, like, I was going to university, I was starting my degree, and that to me was just the opportunity to go, well, right, what's next? Like, so, and I just threw myself into sports science and S&C, and I'd seen that world, and I was like, right, I still want to be close to that world of elite sport. So that kind of, and I can picture that moment of when I was told I wasn't getting a contract. I remember arguing with the guy saying, like, I'll make it, blah, blah, blah. And really, I was just, it was happening, whether I liked it or not. So that kind of that experience then led me to really push and change my deliberate strategy and move it to sports science. And where I am now comes from another experience of 18 months, 2 years ago now, when I've literally been on holiday and the new season starting. I've prepared for pre-season, done all the preparations for pre-season. The players arrive the next day, but I get a message that night, can you come in and from the CEO, can you come in tomorrow morning before everyone else? And again, as clear as day, I can picture that, where I've went into down to Kilmarnock, and within 15 minutes I've been told I'm going on gardening leave and my job's gone. So again, I had this, like, I guess, a deliberate strategy of, I want to work in professional football. I'd done an Institute of Sport, I'd worked with Olympic athletes, I want to work in professional football. And then that was taken away from me, but it also created this massive opportunity of, well, I've got a business that's kind of been bubbling under, just like my degree had been bubbling under. I've got this business that's there. And I've got an opportunity now to put myself into it. So that might seem a strange way to view things, but I think for people at the moment, and certainly students at the moment, that I'm sure some people on this will be sitting thinking, with everything that's going on, what will the job opportunities be, blah blah blah. Like, I was able to turn that into those two things into positives, and it set me up to where I am, and who knows what will kind of come up. And as I say, that the book I was reading was How Will I Measure My Life, and by Clayton Christensen, and it talks about deliberate strategy and emerging opportunities. And I'm just sitting there reading it going, that's basically like everything that I think. Like, I had these strategies, this is what I'm going to do, but you never know what's got around the corner. So.
I like that perspective, Andy. You've turned negatives into a positive, but it's your strength of character that's giving you the energy and the power to kind of move from those. So yeah, no, that
don't get me wrong. There's some dark days,
no,
like
I know.
when you have that. I don't want people to think that it's amazingly. I just went straight into that positive mindset, but you kind of if you are open to moving forward and changing what you're doing, then I think it's the best way to be able to deal with those kind of situations.
Oh, thank you. So anyway, my next question is, we are in challenging times, we all know that. How do you think, or any advice you've got for students on how they can make themselves more marketable within your areas, or the area of sports science? Is there anything that they can do that might help them on their way? Tricky one.
Yeah, a tricky one, because I can see what more and more students are doing in terms of they're very active on like social media. I put something out yesterday on Twitter. First time I posted for ages about getting a student that can help us in Edinburgh, and I was like inundated with messages. So I think that's good to be able to interact with people on social media and things, but I also see the negative side of that, and you even saying like market yourself. Like, I don't know if I'm being old-fashioned already, but I hate that kind of like, oh, you need to market yourself. I think be good at what you do, and again, another phrase that I don't particularly like, networking, but get to know people and understand that relationships matter. And I very much did not like networking, and I still don't like. But as soon as I changed that into like just building relationships, making, like, in my mind, telling myself that I'm building relationships, I'm getting to know people, I think that makes it easier for me. And I don't know why I don't like that. Like, oh, I'm marketing myself and I'm networking. It just doesn't sit right with me. No, I'm not saying that's a bad. I think it's something you have to do, but being very yeah, just open to learning from people rather than going out there to say, I'm the bee's knees, I've got this degree, like you need to employ me. I personally, if someone sends me a CV or an email and I get the impression that they're very much like, I know everything, like I'm a wee bit like, well, that kind of gets me up, like gets me the wrong way. Whereas someone that's like, I'm really keen to learn, I want to be like ready, like try new things, work hard. They're the types of thing for me. If you can get that across in how you do things, and you get it across that you're an honest individual and you're willing to like work and be professional, they're the types of character, like personality traits that I think you need to get across. So if you are going to be on social media, it's just being aware how you're saying that. Or if you're on LinkedIn, how does your profile look? How do you market yourself on there? And just being aware of how like language and everything can make a difference in what you're doing. And I would say that's probably the biggest ones. And go out there and get as much experience as possible, because that you're expanding your network like that. I knew I was doing an internship and didn't realize I was networking for a job 6 years in the future. I was just doing an internship to learn and get experience. And then the last thing I would say, and this is potentially controversial, but as a student, don't expect to be paid. Like, you're getting experience. When you leave university, yeah, that's when you're like, right, I deserve, like, you've got your degree and you've got experience. Yeah, you deserve to be paid. I did a hell of a lot of work for nothing. And that's something that I could be wrong, but I see a lot of stuff on social media. I see a lot of people in that industry of sports science and S&C complaining about wages and stuff. Yet some of the wages are terrible, absolutely ridiculous, should not happen to anyone. They've got a degree and they're getting paid like less than minimum wage. But when you're at university, go out, do stuff for free, because I tell you what, someone will value that and come back in the future. I'll give you an example. There was when I was at the institute and I was running my company, young lad said to me, can I get experience? I know you're working with boxers. I was like, yeah, I can't pick you up or anything, but I'm doing it in Airdrie. And he was based in the West End of Glasgow. So he got like 2 or 3 buses to get there to come and see me take a session, to see me just coach this boxer. That was all he was there for, to watch and speak to me. I immediately thought, he's got something. He's came all the way. And from there, he did a few months of shadowing, and then we built it up, and I eventually paid for like the first and second year of his PhD. Like, my company paid for it because he earned it right. Like, he's earned it, and to me, he's got a massive amount of respect. I now speak to him on the same level. Like, he's finishing off his PhD at the moment. His name's Curtis Ashcroft, and I have a massive amount of respect for him. I speak to him like a colleague now. But that all came from doing a little bit of stuff for free.
Now, great, thanks for that. I like those stories and anecdotes. They're very motivating. Thanks, Andy. Ken, I think you're on next.
Yep. Just kind of jumping back to think about your undergrad and even your PhD as well. So what parts of those degrees do you use now in your current role?
I would say that there'll be a lot of stuff that I maybe don't think about. Certainly undergrad, I don't know if this is just the way I learn, but I didn't do my undergrad to just go and sit an exam and pass an exam. I was doing it for the future. So like a lot of the kind of basic physiology stuff I'll still use today when I'm trying to explain to athletes why we're doing what we're doing. And I read some, I was a geek, and I was like, read anything. I remember reading a paper that wasn't on any of the reading lists, and it was about drinking slushies for the Beijing Olympics to reduce like core body temperature. So there's little things like that I still will talk about. And so that knowledge is there and it sits there. So, and because I learned it for the future rather than learned it to pass an exam, there'll be things from, I don't know, muscle and exercise it was called for a while. I'll still draw on some of that stuff. I think they were just starting to do, we were starting to do more practical stuff in terms of GPS. Obviously being able to do run VO2 max tests and things, having that in your armory, lactate tests is good because you never know when it's going to pop up. So that's more like the technical things. And I guess then other things obviously back doing assignments and things like that, being able to do referencing and all that kind of stuff. For me, it comes in handy. Now, people might not end up going on doing more degrees, but again, that's a technical thing. And then just the ability to know how you learn. So I think we're always learning. And I know that I'm best if I write notes. I wrote notes for this today. I know that if I'm reading something, I need to be writing, going between the two because it just won't go in my brain. So I've learned how my mind works a little bit better, and I'm sure that'll change over time. But that's probably something during university that you maybe don't pay attention to. I can remember some people, and I probably learned from just looking at them and going, "Wow, that looks like so much effort." But I remember people just writing out essays and over and over again, and I was like, I'm not doing that. But I had a way.
I was that guy pre-laptops when I was a student.
Yeah.
Everything out. Yeah.
But I just got into a way in fourth year. There was a group of us and we just had for our exams we just had a process. So I would get in before everyone else. 'Cause I'm good in the morning. I knew that I'd learned that over time at uni. And that's when I would do stuff that required me to think when no one else was there. And then when everyone arrived, I learn as well by teaching. So we would teach each other, or I would teach them. And Darren always called me a bit of a dictator for that. He says I dragged him through his fourth year. So I don't know. They're just little things that I've always I've taken on since uni, and I guess it's got nothing to do with my degree, but it definitely is something I learned whilst at university.
Good.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, definitely. And one final question before I think we'll open it up to questions, Fiona. So if you could go back in time and have a chat with yourself in third and as an undergrad in your third and fourth year, what would you say to yourself? Would you do anything differently, or were you pretty confident how you did it, or any other strategies you may have adopted, do you think? I
don't think I said before, I don't regret anything, so I don't particularly. I think I would have done it the same way. Mm-hmm. What I would maybe say is I'd be a bit more open to opportunities and that kind of networking. I think I was quite fixed mindset. I certainly wasn't a growth, as much of a kind of growth mindset as I am now. I was fixed in my way or the highway type idea. So I think I'd just be more open to opportunities that maybe I disregarded at the time. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know what I was like. I was very this is the way I'm doing it, and maybe didn't open up to other opportunities. So that would be something that I don't know if I missed out on things or whatever. Potentially that would be something. I've never really thought of that before.
Sorry to take you back to those times.
No, that'd be every time. It's like when you look back to high school, you were like, oh, it's amazing. At the time, you potentially didn't, and then I look back to university, and I'm like, even exam period. You look back at it now with many fond memories of not a geek. I enjoyed the studying, but I just that kind of time with people was brilliant.
Good. Brilliant.
Thanks, Andy. Nan and my questions for the time being. We might think of some more. So I'm going to ask the audience if they can start thinking. You've got this great opportunity to ask Andy any questions. You're open to, obviously within the boundaries of decency, questions, aren't you, Andy? So don't be scared.
Yep.
But we have Emma was well prepared and has sent us one by email beforehand, and it does kind of follow what we've been saying. And she is saying, what advice, what things could someone do that's studying an undergraduate do to pursue a career in sports science? Now, we talked about marketing, looking at social media, LinkedIn, CVs, but what can think of experiences or anything that they might be able to do? We have touched on it a bit, so
I think probably just add to some of the things I've said. I like diversity of experience. I was rugby, but then I went and got experience in hockey, football, basketball. So try and be open to go and try other sports and other maybe away from what you're used to. I think that would be certainly one. Put yourself out there for those opportunities. I think, and if there's none that are, if you're Googling them and there's no opportunities popping up, go and create one. Go and email someone. Go and we've got I do work with Glasgow City, and he didn't email me or anything, but there's a guy who's doing his I can't remember if he's finished his masters at Glasgow or if he's currently doing it. Anyway, he emailed the club website to say offer his services, he's looking for experience. So I think that's a way of doing it. If you really, really want to work in sport, you have to show people you really, really want to work in sport, because if you think about in Scotland, you've probably got the Institute of Sport, which will have a set amount of jobs, and a lot of those are lifers, they won't leave those roles. So you've got that. You've got Scotland rugby, Scotland football. They'll have full-time jobs, and then you've got some of your football teams will have full-time jobs. So there's not a lot of jobs out there. So you have to be able to kind of to go for those. I don't know if they're in third and fourth year of Glasgow Uni, then utilize the Cathcart scholarship. I've not even touched on that today, but I got a Cathcart scholarship to go and help with Scottish rugby under 20s for the World Cup. So I got 3 weeks in Venice, all paid for, and I went to work with that squad. So I know many people have used that now. Utilize that opportunity. It's money to go and work anywhere in the world. They've sent people Australia, America. Why not? So try those things. It adds to your CV. I think what else?
No, don't worry, Andy. We've got another question, but I'm always saying
cool.
it'd be interesting to know. Obviously, getting experience within the sports science arena does forward your career in that area, but also jobs that, whether they obviously not in hospitality and retail at the moment, but hopefully soon, or maybe in the past, call centres, anything, caring jobs that will enable you to develop those transferable skills. I always say to students, they're just as relevant.
No, yeah. I
don't
agree.
put words in your mouth.
No. I would agree. My first job was working in the blacksmith shop in Gretna Green, where I'm from, and I was a till assistant.
Yeah.
But the amount of people that obviously loads of tourists from all over the world are coming through, and I've had to kind of try and understand what they're trying to say in broken English and be a smiley person the whole time, and I've probably learned things without even really thinking about it that happened in those circumstances.
Cool. Right answer. Thanks again. All right, we have a question. How is your experience working with Paralympic and Olympic athletes? What were the most difficult challenges, and what did you most enjoy? Thanks for the question.
What were my experience? So I worked with boxing and athletics going into the Commonwealth Games, and because of that, some of the athletics athletes were then going to Olympics. So worked with various different, from throws to endurance, like marathon runners, which was a diverse amount of athletes and different types of athletes and different personalities. And then in terms of the Paralympic side, I again, through athletics, I worked with a few athletes there, and they were probably some of the best fun sessions I've ever had, because you work with a rugby player, or even if you work with a cyclist or any able-bodied athlete, there's pretty much like a set kind of, these are the exercises you do, and this is the research that's out there, and this is how you can get X, Y, and Z better. With working with, like, I worked with Jo Butterfield, who was the world record holder for club and discus. So she had very, very little function from the neck down. And it was like you had to be so innovative to be able to produce exercises that would help her in her sport within a gym environment. You're having to try and make up ways of attaching her to certain bits of equipment. So that was great fun. But then unbelievable perspective when you hear their stories and what they're going through, like, or been through to get to where they are. Like, it's so, they taught me so much more than I ever taught them, and it was a real challenge. I had to learn so much outside of what we're doing in terms of a health and safety aspect of what we're doing in the gym. So and going back to the previous question, see if you can work in that environment or watch people that are very good and work with like disabled athletes, then that's an unbelievable learning experience, and that was great fun. And they went on to win medals. Jo won world championship gold and went on to Beijing, and not Beijing, Rio.
Cool.
So yeah, it was cool.
Thanks, Sandy. I'm mindful of time. We're coming towards the end of the session. Got another question. What organisation sports do you and Athlete Physio Focus currently work with?
So we work across, I guess, a range of sports. The big ones would be like Scotland women's football team, Glasgow City women's football team, Berwick Rangers football team. They're like kind of our big partners. I work with pro triathlete, Iron Woman triathlete. Work with golfers, like a lot of individual athletes from lots of different sports. From physio focused perspective, we're slightly more general public, but we'll help different like university teams in terms of providing physio support for that. And then we work with Glasgow Track Racing Club, so track cycling, of which one of the guys is on the course. Again, networking, knew him through Institute of Sport, and when he was an athlete, and now he's got his own club. And yeah, so we work with a range of different ones, and we're also now working in the business realm, in terms of taking what we do with sports and athletes and putting that into businesses. So we work with like Virgin Money UK on their kind of well-being and physical activity service, I guess.
A huge range.
Yeah.
Range.
That's why it's fun.
Yeah, keep you up at night. Is there any? We're finishing now, and I just wondered. I always like asking the question: is there anything that you think I should, both Nen and I, should have asked you that we haven't asked you? Is that maybe too difficult a question to ask on the spur of the moment?
I don't know. I think the only thing I would say is that every kind of experience you have will like take you to where you are now, and I think you got to value everything that you know, whether that's from school, family, friends. All those experiences certainly help, and I think that's something that maybe doesn't get considered, and that It's about, I certainly consider like lifelong learning, and like I think that those kind of things, and like your experience and what you read outside of your realm, it all comes together to help you with your job. And I think that's probably maybe a question of like, what do you do to learn away from your job and your that's something that I value a lot now, and how I try to be a better person rather than just always consider myself as I'm an S&C coach, I'm a sports scientist. Now everything I do is about being a better person and how I can help people. So I think that's something to consider as a student as well.
Thanks, Andy. A brilliant end. I want to thank you. I think Nairn and I would like to thank you very much for speaking today, taking time out of your day. You've been so honest and open, and I feel if we had more time, we could keep chatting. So thanks again to all the students who joined us today to participated. Andy, you couldn't see them, but there was an audience. Great questions. If you have missed any of your questions, please email us at careers. What's the website? careers@glasgow.ac.uk, and we'll pass them on to Andy if you've had any moments when you think, oh damn, I should have asked that question. Just a bit of PR ourselves. We have other big brave talks this afternoon, Andy. We've got a lady called Dr. Kate Bishop from the Francis Crick Institute, and also we've got zoologist Jack Randall. So check out online for those. Thank you, Andy. Thanks, Nairn, for taking the time, particularly in your uber busy schedule. It's been a real privilege. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I enjoyed that.
Thanks, Andy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.